Hello and welcome to Smaulgld. In case you missed it, top gold and silver stories for the week ended May 7th, 2017. The Russian hack that didn't work on purpose. Emmanuel Macron defeats Marine Le Pen in French presidential race. Gold and silver fall. The gold-silver ratio topped 75 to 1 this past week. The Fed hints at more rate hikes as the economy slows. And gold demand in China and India rise but fall again at the U.S. Mint. Let's look at the top stories. Well, just out, the French elected Emmanuel Macron despite this hack that happened just 2 days ago and the release of potentially damaging documents and emails. Macron and the media immediately blamed Russia. There was a mad dash to discredit the hack, to claim that some of the documents were fake, some may have been true. And also the French put a kind of a criminal moratorium on reporting on the hacks. Now, the win for Macron solidifies the EU's grip on power. Marine Le Pen was viewed as a threat to the entire existence of the EU. That threat is now gone. And it also provides this win against the anti-democratic Russian who has raised his head over the past couple of years as being the arch enemy of the West. And this also, the win by Macron, symbolically slows nationalism. Now, what seems interesting is the release of these documents, and I have no way of knowing one way or the other. I will never insist that one view is true or the other view is false. You can't tell with these things. But if indeed the Russians were going to hack the election in favor of Marine Le Pen, and they were going to release documents, they certainly would have done it far in advance of the election date so that it could have got the media coverage. Now, the way it worked out, because the documents were released so late, and they involved all sorts of innuendo, they hadn't paid his taxes, that Macron had offshore accounts. I didn't go through it. I was just seeing the passing references, and of course, damning if true, but there was no way of proving them, certainly not within a short period of time, and especially if you're not allowed to report on them. But what was out, because the hack was out, and because the information was not widely disseminated or discussed, what was discussed was that the Russians had done it. And because of this, it just seems that there's now this ability to say, well, we finally beat the Russians. You know, they tried, they worked in America, but now the good guys, we've all gotten together, the pro-democratic group of people have now stopped the Russians, and this now has to stop because they are interfering with democracies left and right in the Western world. And it seems to me that that's kind of the narrative that the Macron people and the people in the EU want to establish. So it almost seems, and I'm not saying this is the case, but it almost seems like they did it themselves and released these documents late solely so they can push that narrative that basically they knew they were going to win anyway. So they released these documents. There's a shroud of mystery around them. They try to create the concept, here we go again, you know, Hillary Clinton lost because of this nonsense. But we're not going to allow it to happen this time, and we still have this Russian hacking issue. And this also, in some respects, delegitimizes further Donald Trump, because if the Russians try to hack and they were successful, well, that's how he won, because the Russians put him in there. But we're now on to this Russian game, and we stopped it, and now sanity prevails because Macron is in, and we were not going to go for illegitimate nationalists like Le Pen the way the Americans went for Trump. That seems to be, whether it was intentional, whether it was the Russians and they did it incorrectly, or whether the EU people did it and this is the narrative they wanted to create. Either way, they now have that narrative. So what does that mean for gold and silver? Well, the last time when Le Pen didn't win in the runoff, they made it out to be a big deal that, and they never expected her to win, that, you know, the equity markets rose after that. Gold and silver got whacked down because Le Pen was gone. Now, I would anticipate that they'll probably do the same thing again now. The euro will probably go up. equities will rise. Everyone will be joyous around this young Frenchman who's going to lead France into the 26th century. And, maybe gold and silver get hit again. Now, rationally, none of this should happen because from day one, no poll showed Le Pen even coming close, not even outliers. And all the polls had her losing in a runoff, no matter who the final candidate was, by more than 20, 25 points. And indeed, she lost by a significant margin. So we'll see if they use this Le Pen loss as another reason to celebrate, because they don't have reason to celebrate earnings or low PE, so they've got to celebrate something to drive the equity markets higher. And we'll see what they do to gold and silver. I don't know, but gold last week closed down 3.1% to 1227, and silver closed down 5% to 1631. It's lost over $2 now over the last few weeks. There's your gold silver ratio, ended the week at 75.16 to 1, and that's because silver falling faster than gold. When both drop, silver drops harder. Now, if that reverses, maybe we'll see the silver rise faster than gold if they both rise, and then this gold-silver ratio chart will flip over. Okay, let's get to look at tweets of the week. One thing, I did a YouTube and a blog post on this today. It wasn't about China and its credit, but it was about China encouraging those on the Silk Road to use local currency in their financing. And a lot of people have they're trying to say that China is somehow the big threat to the dollar, and people are going to use local currencies, including the yuan. But one of the problems with the yuan as a global currency, it has some of the very same deficiencies as the US dollar, i.e. plenty of credit expansion. And one of the problems with the Chinese yuan the United States doesn't have has been around that long as a dominant currency. In fact, it's not a dominant currency. And I had mentioned this last week, and I've been mentioning it for the past few weeks, that China is not a paragon of economic virtue. I mean, their credit creation, as we showed last week, is really going mad. And Reuters picked up on this earlier in the week, something I've been saying. It says China, well, I put China, despite its gold, is called credit fever. But what Reuters said was China's leverage rising at an alarming pace. And we'll see in a bit. There's more comments about what's happening in China. So China's not a slam dunk. China's grown. A lot of that growth has come from the West. It has come from building infrastructure and building factories to sell to the West. Now we'll see if they can make the transition. And it seems they're following with the United States, that you get rich being a productive economy, and then you kind of live off your wealth and you create more credit to keep the growth going. Now, in the United States case, the extra credit only kept the United States at a no growth level. Here, this extra credit, building ghost cities, kind of keeps the growth going. But I think their massive growth phase is probably over. And China has political issues in that they need to keep the people happy. They need to keep the people fed. So they're not going to slow down and allow the free market to adjust. They're going to issue more credit, more stimulus, monetary, and otherwise. Other things that happened in the week. There was a new Indian cashless gold buying app. That's an interesting thing. It's not to buy, supposedly, it's not digital gold in the sense that it doesn't exist, but you're able to buy your gold through an app. The gold-silver ratio, I did something yesterday on this tangentially about the a real silver shortage. You can check that out on YouTube. It's called a real silver shortage. But the point is that that I made in that, it wasn't about the gold-silver ratio. It was about the U.S. Mint, what they did in order to cover for a silver shortage that was caused by the gold find in 1849 in California. We won't get into that, but what the gold-silver ratio was, and that everybody's saying it has to go back to, was something that was set artificially by government, by fiat, that 16 to 1, 15 to 1 ratio. Now, there are reasons why that ratio, and that was based, yes, it was based on relative rarity, but relative rarity does not necessarily determine, it may be a factor in value. And so my point in this tweet here is markets expecting expecting markets to revert to a set ratio is irrational, because people are saying it's irrational that the ratio is as high as it is and that it should revert back to that natural ratio. But that natural ratio of 1561 isn't natural. That is a set ratio. So it's irrational to think that the markets are going to bring you to back to that level. Now, markets will bring you to a correct level, and that's whatever the market says it is. However, we know that both metals are manipulated, so possibly silver's manipulated more than gold, and maybe the natural level is lower, except that it's easier to manipulate silver because it's smaller, and that's what happens. All right. What else do we have during the week? Last week was Smaulgld Appreciation Week. There was a lot of original content. We'll just quickly run through it. That's the purpose of this blog post. It's a week in review, but there was a lot of Smaulgld content. We covered the American Gold Eagle sales. They fell to 10-year lows. The Fed, this is Bernanke, says they're going to cut their balance sheet in half. I don't know about that. Now, the Atlanta Fed is predicting 4.3% GDP in the second quarter. Remember, the Fed predicted close to 4% GDP in the first quarter at this time in the first quarter, and it ended up being under 1%. Personal income was below expectations. Personal spending was also low. These are not good numbers. U.S. manufacturing below expectations. Construction spending was down as opposed to up slightly. U.S. mint sales so far in May, not any better than April, which was a horrific month. Not much to report on because they only reported, I think, once last week, and it wasn't that much. And there they are. So far, month to date, a couple of thousand American Gold Eagles, 500,000 Silver Eagles, and I don't think there was another report after that. If you want to buy gold or silver and add to those numbers, you can do so through the Smaulgld site, through the links below, or through the banners and links on the website. You can buy from BGSC, SD Bullion, Money Metals Exchange, and Golden Eagle Coin. And if you do, Smaulgld gets a small commission. It's not investment advice, but you pay no more, no less than if you visited the sites directly. So please check them out if you're interested in buying gold or silver. You can buy that Shawnee National Park. That one's from Money Metals Exchange. Just click on that and you can buy that one. American Silver Eagle sales, they were better than the gold sales, but they weren't good at all. We did a poll on why people aren't buying. The number one choice is people are tired of years of silver underperformance. There were other choices too, but that was the number one choice at about almost 50%. The rest were split. Kazakhstan gets serious about its gold reserves. You can check that out. They've added more gold to their reserves. 3 large silver stockpiles. I covered these. These are the 3 large piles. JP Morgan's, well, not just JP Morgan's, but the silver that is in the COMEX vaults, half of which is in the JP Morgan vault, the Shanghai Gold Exchange silver, and then I covered ETFs, silver held in ETFs. That does not cover silver held in other types of funds. So there's another couple 100 million ounces. I think if you add the ETFs and the other funds, remember Sprott, PSLV is not a ETF, it's a fund. CEF, Central Fund of Canada, is not an ETF. You add those in and a few others, you get even more. So there's about 900 million ounces, over a year's worth of mining supply, that are in these large stockpiles, or supposedly in those. Article here, will fear or greed prevail during the Trump administration? So far, it is greed. The stock market is up. Luxury goods spending is up. Cognac, leather bags, Fendi, those types of things. Big quarter, first quarter, but Main Street sales down. Places like Sears and so on. And fear, well, that's the gold trade, and that's starting to head down as well. Now, these things can all change on a dime. We'll see how that goes. Let's see. We had the Buffalo sales. They weren't good either. No relief to plummeting U.S. mint sales. Then we did the Perth mint sales. Gold sales. Horrible. Worse than... I don't have a chart that goes back long enough. 10 years, these were the worst. 10,000 ounces only at the Perth Mint. But still, the Perth Mint managed to sell, even in its worst month in 10 years, the U.S. Mint, which is even worse. India, though, gold demand up big time in March, up February, but silver, not so much. And that kind of shows, and that's what this blog post and YouTube talks about. India imported $7.7 billion worth of gold and only $294 million in silver. Jobs report were good from ADP, and we'll see later in the week. They were also good from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. On Wednesday, the Fed Med came out and said the committee views the slowing in growth during the first quarter is likely to be transitory. They're not using weather as an excuse, but the first quarter, to their, I don't know if it's to their credit or to their defense, the past few years has been the worst quarter. So I guess they're hoping that the Atlanta Fed, the GDP picks up in the second quarter. I'll wait and see. I don't think it will. I think it'll pick up. It'll be like 1%, maybe 2%, but not enough for the Fed to justify the way they look at things to raise interest rates. And as I always say, the reason they're raising interest rates has nothing to do with the economy, but rather to create demand, new demand for treasury bonds, because the dollar is the world reserve currency and it pays a rate of interest, and other sovereign bonds do not. So I think they're still on this quest to try to prove themselves as prudent central banks, while they've convinced Japan and the EU to do QE, to have zero interest rates, negative interest rates, and large balance sheets. And what the Fed is trying to do is create the impression that they're going to cut their balance sheet, they're going to raise interest rates, they have raised interest rates, and therefore U.S. Treasuries are still a good deal. Also, we have this story on the president of the People's Bank of China saying Belt Road financing should use local currencies. This, I believe, is the Bloomberg article. I took mine from the actual speech. I read the speech and analyzed it that way. Here's Kyle Bass. All hell is about to break loose in China. As I'm saying, that China is not the most, just because they have gold. A lot of gold bugs think China's the bomb. You know, China's got it going on because they have gold. They play the long game. They're doing all these things. Yeah, they are, but they are not doing them in the most prudent fashion. They're basically wielding new power, and there's no guarantee. Remember, it's all state-run. There's no guarantee that China is going to emerge as a dominant economic player. They could. I believe they most likely will. But and they seem to be going about it correctly. However, not with this excessive credit creation. The biggest Achilles heel that China has is keeping over 1 billion people fed and happy. And that's tough to do when you're not counting on the market to do it. You're counting on the genius of central planning. Although they will get some help. They have a large gold find. They're going to make the third largest gold mining site in the Shandong province. There's a story from SRS Rocco. Now, he mentions, as many people have noted, that the reason Bitcoin is rising is because there's pressure on Bitcoin and there's buying pressure. And there could be buying pressure in the silver market, but that silver market pressure is not released like it is in Bitcoin in higher prices. It's just released by adding more and more contracts, short contracts, onto the exchanges. So that's how you cap the silver price and its momentum. You can check out that article on SRS Rocco. Buying mania will push silver price much higher as Dow Jones silver ratio falls back. Here's your factory orders, not too good. The claims, very low initial claims. Non-farm productivity took a dive, 0.6% down. So we're not having this wonderful economy heating up. We're getting the jobs, but they're not any really different than they were in the Obama administration. They're lower paying, they're not productive jobs, people aren't producing as much, and people are just not claiming benefits. But the unemployment rate, I think, is 4.4%. But incomes aren't rising. On May 5th, we had the Cinco de Mayo. The Mexican Libertads are now available for pre-order from most bullion dealers. You could check out those coins and a little history of the Casa de Moneda de Mexico. And you can see what's going on in the Libertad market. You can check out pricing and shipping on those coins. And there's the links for them right there. As we mentioned, Chinese gold demand for gold bars and coins soars in first quarter. Lower gold prices bolster gold demand. Premiums rise in India and China. So now we're seeing the East picking up. The prices coming down, and they're stampeding back into gold. And in the West, U.S. Mint and Perth Mints, it's actually in the East, but those sales are tremendously down. Here's a story on the glittering history of gold. There's your April payrolls, better than expected. Still, I mean, if you really had a robust jobs for current population in the United States, 200,000 is not really going to do it. you're going to need 4, 5, 600,000 new jobs created. But look at that unemployment rate, 4.4%, down from 4.6%. Then you got Bullard, St. Louis Fed president. If Fed hikes once or twice, it's not the end of the world. Here's a guy who was saying after the first rate hike, that's probably enough. We don't need any to 2018. They probably told him, get in line. We're going to do another one or two. We kind of have to. And the New York Fed cut its GDP second quarter to 1.8 from 2.3, but the Atlanta Fed still has theirs at 4.2. Again, raising rates into this environment, the way the Fed thinks about it, doesn't make much sense. There's your pitch to donate to Smaulgld via Bitcoin. You can also do so via PayPal or become a patron on Patreon. All the links are below or on the website. And the final story, here we go. Well, no, there's two more stories. A real silver shortage. This was out yesterday. I'm not going to give away what that one's about. You can click on the link. You could check out the YouTube. And today's story, local currency should be used in belt and road financing. So says the People's Bank of China's president. You could check that link out. You could check out that YouTube. Thanks very much for listening. Visit our sponsors. Like this YouTube. Subscribe to Smaulgld. I got a lot of things for you to do. Donate to Smaulgld. Follow Smaulgld on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, wherever you like. Retweet Smaulgld. Like Smaulgld. Thank you very much.